Hey, I'm Sergio. I'm going to be playing both the animal rights and the undecided. I'm going to be flip-flopping in a bit.
Hi, my name is Vanessa, and I'll be playing the part of the animal welfare person.
Hi guys, I'm Nalini, and I'm going to be playing your veterinarian and the undecided person. Oh, I can't wait to go to the shelter to go get a doggy. Oh my gosh, another protest in LA.
All animals, free 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 all animals.
Animals are not slaves. In front of the shelter? I was about to go inside the shelter to see what animals, but I see you have a sign. What is that about?
Of course, they're horrible. These poor animals are stuck in cages and suffering while many of them are killed out of convenience. They're stuck in this horrible cycle which is caused by overbreeding because of greedy people who want to own another sentient creature. Pet breeders are the worst, but animal shelters are part of the problem that treats animals like property.
What do you mean by that? I thought shelters are supposed to rescue animals.
They do rescue animals, but that's not exactly the whole picture. The bigger problem is how animals end up here in the first place. Every year, millions of animals are bred, bought, abandoned, and surrendered. Many of them end up on the shelters because humans treat them as disposable. I believe that animals should not be treated as property. Like humans, animals are sentient beings, meaning they can feel pain, fear, stress, pleasure, just like us. Animals need people who can advocate on their behalf because they don't have a voice. They deserve to have moral consideration and for someone to fight for those rights. Free all animals, free all animals.
So what you're saying is basically animal rights means animals should have the same rights as humans?
Well, not exactly the same as human rights, but all animals should have the right to not be physically harmed or experimented on or forced into breeding on the whims of other people. It's not fair to them since they don't get a say. If we did this to each other, we'd call it slavery. For humans, animals are just a commodity, something else to entertain them. And even if there are some good owners, the process itself is evil. It's very common for the animal to be abandoned or abused, and all the unwanted, unpurchased animals to be discarded like trash.
But what about people who love their pets? Most people don't even think they're harming animals or their animals.
Even if the owners are treating the animals well, which they don't, think of where the animals come from. For dogs, many of them come from puppy mills, which are typically just facilities where dogs come from breeding factories for people and their greed. These dogs are forcibly bred and made to give birth over and over again until they can't produce any more babies. Pet breeding should be abolished and all these animals should be set free. Free all animals, free all animals.
That's a lot to think about, but my friend actually works in the shelter, so I think I'm gonna go get her take on it.
Animals, free all animals, free all animals, free all animals.
Oh, hey, you made it in. Welcome to the animal shelter. Ooh. Nice to see you. So I saw you standing outside next to the protester. What's going on over there?
Yeah,
Looks pretty intense.
It was kind of a lot, and he was saying how animals should not be misused or abused or treated as slave. It was a lot to take in. He said, I'm not even sure if it's right to own a pet at this point.
Not necessarily. That idea comes from animal rights perspective, meaning that they focus on eliminating human use of animals entirely. What we focus on here in this shelter is animal welfare, which is more about responsibility, and we recognize the people and the animals are connected, but that means we have a duty to treat them humanely and meet their needs properly.
Okay, that makes so much sense. But now I'm kind of stuck on, should I get an animal from the shelter or should I get an animal from a breeder?
That's actually one of the really important questions you can ask about something like that here at the shelter. When you adopt, you're giving a home to an animal that already exists and needs one. So a lot of these animals didn't end up here by accident. They were abandoned or they were surrendered or they just became too much for someone to handle.
Too much how?
Honestly, all kinds of reasons. Some people underestimate how much time and how much money and patience it takes for owning a pet. We've had dogs brought in because they bark too much, they chew the furniture, they have medical care that costs too much, and they don't expect to pay those costs out of their own pocket. So that's actually one of the most important questions you can ask and here in the shelter. When you adopt, you're giving a home to an animal that already exists and needs one. A lot of these animals didn't end up here by accident, and they were either abandoned, surrendered, or just became too much for someone to handle.
Too much how?
Honestly, all kinds of reasons. Some people even underestimate how much time, money, and patience it takes for caring for a pet. We've had dogs brought in because they either bark too much, they chew the furniture, or they have medical care that the owner just doesn't put into consideration because it costs so much.
It's kind of messed up.
I've even seen animals surrendered because they were moving or they just didn't have time anymore either.
Yeah, that's really messed up.
It really is, yeah. And the bigger issue here right now, the shelters are dealing with the effects of overbreeding and abandonment. When more animals are bred than there are responsible homes, some of them just end up here and it's almost unavoidable.
So it's not just breeders, it's people too?
Exactly, it's a cycle. Breeding increases the number of animals available, and when people aren't fully prepared, they have those animals surrendered. We end up taking care of these animals that were once really wanted, like someone picked them out, they named them, probably loved them at first, and now they ended up here.
That actually makes so much sense. It makes it feel more real, you know? Like they're just not random animals.
And they're not. Every animal here has a story. And when you adopt, you're not just getting a pet that you're not just getting a pet, you're stepping into that story and giving it a better outcome.
But what if you want a specific, breed or...
Well, that's fair. A lot of people tend to want that. But what most people don't realize is that the shelters and rescues often have purebreds and mixes with very similar traits. You could pick a dog based on looks and realize it has way more energy than you expected. We always joke around that people come in wanting a cute, calm dog and leave with one that runs their whole life.
That's literally something that would happen to me.
It happens more than you think. That's why we try to match animals with the right owners, not just send them home quickly.
So adopting is kind of like making a responsible choice?
Exactly. It's about reducing suffering and not contributing to it. Animal welfare doesn't say all breeding is wrong, but it does say that if animals are already struggling to find homes, we should prioritize in helping them first.
That actually makes so much sense. But what about if an animal is sick or injured?
That's where a veterinarian comes in. They handle all the medical care and help make some of the toughest ethical decisions about each animal's well-being. Let's go talk to them.
Okay.
Meet our vet. Here she is.
Hi there. I heard you're interested in learning more about what a shelter veterinarian does.
Yeah, I am.
As a shelter veterinarian, my job is to protect the animals' health and animal welfare. Veterinarian medicine is not only about treating illness, but it also involves ethical decision, especially when it comes to pet breeding and overpopulation, like these two puppies in the shelter. When animals arrive at the shelter, we perform medical exams that involve parasites, infections, injuries, and other health problems. Many animals arrive in poor conditions because they've been neglected or abandoned, sometimes as a result of irresponsible pet breeding or somebody that can't no longer take care of their animal. Many animals arrive in poor conditions because they have been neglected or abandoned, sometimes as a result of irresponsible pet breeding or animal owners not being prepared for the animals they bring home.
What kind of treatments do these animals usually need?
It varies, but common treatments include vaccines, parasite treatments, wound care, and sometimes surgery. One of the most important procedures we perform here is spaying and neutering, which directly is in controlling of pet breeding.
That's one way we control overpopulation.
Exactly. Preventing unwanted litters and reducing the number of animals that end up homeless in the future. Veterinarians also monitor animals for behavioral health. Stress, fear, lack of stimulation can negatively affect animals' well-being. Providing enrichment and proper housing is essential.
I've heard about euthanasia being an issue in shelters. How do veterinarians balance this touchy topic?
That's one of the hardest decisions veterinarians have to make. Veterinarian ethics often include balancing compassion with difficult realities, and sometimes those realities are often influenced by overpopulation linked to excessive pet breeding or irresponsible pet breeding. Sometimes these shelters are unable to house all these as breeding continues. Not only, but as a result of poor genetic breeding, animals can suffer from severe illness or injuries that cannot be treated. But by the guiding principle is always the best interest of the animal. The goal is always to minimize pain and prevent prolonged suffering. Another important part of veterinary medicine is that pet breeders don't always think about preventative care. What does that mean? A lot of suffering we see in shelters could have been avoided by doing the proper medical care, like basic things like vaccines, proper nutrition, routine checkups. Responsible breeding should include proper medical care, planning, and long-term commitment to the animals being produced.
It sounds like this problem is a lot more complicated than I initially thought. People taking up animals from neglectful breeders is causing a lot of issues with these animals, and is why animal shelters and veterinarians such as yourself are so important.
Exactly, and in many cases, these animals are born from poor breeding practices. Animals are bred without considering their long-term welfare or the available homes they have. There's another side to pet breeding that people don't always see, and that's medical consequences for selective breeding. In veterinary medicine, we see patterns. There's another side of pet breeding that people don't always see, and that's the consequences of selective breeding. In veterinarian medicine, we see patterns. Certain breeds are predisposed to specific diseases based on how they're bred over time. For example, some dogs are bred for appearance, like fat faces, small bodies, but those traits can come as a cost. We see dogs that struggle to breathe, hip dysplasia, chronic joint pain, heart disease, neurological issues, all linked to genetics that were intentionally selected for. So when we talk about whether pet breeding is ethical, we have to ask, is it ethical to continue pet breeding if we know it causes the animal suffering? Think about that.
Wow, so yeah, even if breeding continues and breeders take the proper precautions, there's still risk for these animals, huh?
Yes, and that's where the ethical line becomes complicated. A responsible breeder will screen for genetic diseases, limit breeding frequencies, and ensure proper care. But even then, there are risks. And the reality is, not all breeders follow those standards. Some prioritize profit, appearance, over health, which leads to animals being born with preventative conditions. From a veterinarian perspective, we're often treating the result of those decisions. And we don't just see a cute puppy, we see a long-term medical outlook. The main issue is what happens after the animal is born. Breeding creates more animals, but it doesn't guarantee homes for them. When demand drops and animals develop behavioral issues, they're mostly dropped into the shelters like this. That's something I see firsthand, that an animal that was once wanted, but now are here because they're too expensive or too difficult.
So breeding doesn't just affect the animal, it seems to affect the whole system, at the shelter, at the vet, and also for the person who's trying to adopt the animal, huh?
Exactly. It contributes to overpopulation. It then puts the pressure on shelters, veterinarian resources, and ultimately leads to the difficult decision to euthanize. That's why many veterinarians advocate for spay and neutering, and not because we're against animals reproducing entirely, but because we're trying to reproduce preventable suffering on a population level. At the same time, it's important to be honest, and breeding itself isn't automatically unethical. If breeding is done with a strict health screening, with long-term care plans, with accountability of every animal, then it can align more with animal welfare principles. But when it comes to standards aren't being met, which is very common, it becomes a source of harm. So as veterinarians, we're constantly balancing two realities, supporting human-animal relationship while also protecting animals from unnecessary harm. And that's why the important question is, pet breeding ethical? Doesn't have a yes or no answer. It depends on whether the practice prioritizes the animal's well-being over human demand.
Wow, thank you very much. That was really insightful. I can see that this is a much more complicated issue than I thought. Thank you.
Wow, that was so insightful. I'm glad I was able to meet your veterinarian too, so she can give me more information and more wisdom and education, spread awareness. So thank you so much for that.
Free all animals, free all animals. As you can see, these people are fourth euthanizing these animals and killing so many of them. It's so awful for these practices to be doing all this. And when they don't euthanize them, they're just kept in cages to suffer just like an abused animal should. And like they're treating them like slaves. How awful.
Hi guys, thanks for watching group number 22, Pet Breeding. Is pet breeding ethical? I'm your veterinarian.
I'm the animal rights.
And we're both undecided.
And I'm the animal welfare person.
Over and out.